Now, today here we will talk about one important, as we know that today we are going to talk about a little GS paper 4, that is ethics and integrity. Ethics and integrity, and how ethics and integrity can help us to become a good civil servant, because ultimately your purpose is to become a civil servant. So, here today we are going to talk about briefly that one important idea of ethics that is very relevant for bureaucracy, for a civil servant in general. So, the topic that we are going to talk about today here is certain professional dilemma. Professional dilemma is the topic that we are going to talk about today first. Because of course, you all are going to be a professional, a civil servant. Civil servant service is a profession. And whenever somebody works in a profession, then sometimes or the other, they often face certain dilemma, that there are certain choices and they have to decide that which choice to adopt and which choice to reject, what we should do and what we should not do. So, whenever such dilemma occurs, then what are those dilemma that civil servants often face in their career? And if they face such dilemma, then how can they resolve that? What are the philosophical basis? What are the ethical basis of those dilemma? So in some detail, we are going to talk about the dilemmas that a civil servant or any other professional for that matter faces. Now, before we talk about professional dilemma, I would like to briefly talk about what exactly is the meaning of the term profession. What exactly is the meaning of the term profession? This term profession or professional, we often use in our daily life again. Very often you say that being professional or work in a profession. But first of all, we have to understand that what exactly is the meaning of that term. What exactly we mean by this term when we say a profession. How is it that a profession is different from any other job or business? So, when you are, you can say, working in a field of medical science, for example, then you become professional. Medical science is a professional. Engineering is a profession. Or legal profession we talk about. Civil service is a profession. Or you can say media is a profession. So, how is it that these professions are different from any other business that people may possibly engage in? So, if somebody starts a shop, for example, it starts small business, then how is that business different from the profession that a civil service may be, or any other profession for that matter may be? So, briefly, I would like to talk about what exactly is the meaning of the term profession. Now, the first important definition of the term profession is that any job becomes a profession when our work as a professional has a significant impact on the life of other people. That is a primary defining characteristics of a profession. Well, our work, you can say, influences the life of others in a significant manner. So there is one primary defining characteristics of a profession. So for example, if you start a shop, a business for example, then your work may not influence the life of the people very significantly. Because even if you become unethical, for example, then also people have a choice that they can simply stop going to you again. They will not suffer too much for that. But when you become a doctor, for example, then your work as a doctor has a significant impact on the life of other person. That it may be the question of life and death of the person who is dealing with you as a patient, and you as a doctor. Engineering similarly again. So when you are working in the field of engineering, then your work has a significant impact on the people who are going to use your product that you make as an engineer. Or a civil servant, when you work as a civil servant, then your work or your, can say, actions, your behavior has a significant impact on the people, general public, on the whole country as such. So, whenever our work influences the life of somebody else in a very significant manner, then we call that particular job as a profession. There is a primary defining characteristics. Now, apart from that primary defining characteristics, that every profession, in order to be called a profession, must fulfill 3 important criteria. So apart from that, is a basic criteria, but apart from that, there are 3 other important criteria that any profession must fulfill in order to be called a professional. What are they? Now, first important criteria of a professional is that, of a profession is that every profession requires certain specialized knowledge. Or let me talk. So, three criteria of a profession. First one is specialized knowledge or technical expertise. Specialized knowledge or technical expertise. So, as we have seen again in the primary defining characteristics earlier, that a professional's work influences the life of other people in a very, very significant manner. So, in order to ensure that they do not, can say, affect others' life in a negative manner, they should have certain technical knowledge, certain expertise that must be unique to them. And in order to acquire that expertise, they have to work very hard. Of course, then only they can acquire the knowledge. So that is the first important. So doctor, for example, and this knowledge must be guaranteed. There should be some criteria that every professional must fulfill to prove to the world that no, I have that knowledge, so I can work in that profession. So in order to become a doctor, you need to have an MBBS degree. That will guarantee that anybody who who works in the medical profession has that technical knowledge. Or for engineering, you need to have a BE degree. For legal profession, you need to have LLB. And for civil service, you have to clear the UPSC exam. That will tell you that yes, you have that expertise, that knowledge that can help you to become a good civil servant in the future. So first important thing is the specialized knowledge, technical expertise that every professional must have, and there should be guarantee. There should be a credible guarantee that anybody who works in that profession has that technical expertise. Number one. Number two is that every profession must have certain, value system, certain ethical value, or sometimes we can call that as value system. Ethical value, a value system. Ethics, so a profession is more about, as we will see shortly, profession is more about ethics rather than just about the knowledge. Because if you look at the knowledge, we will discuss that a lot in detail in our class, relationship between knowledge and ethics. If you look at knowledge, then knowledge does not have any value. What does that mean? Well, knowledge is neither good nor it is bad. So knowledge is just knowledge. It is value neutral. There is nothing called good or bad in that. There is nothing called right or wrong in the knowledge. Every knowledge is just knowledge. It is how do we use the knowledge that is something that is related to the value, ethics. Knowledge can be used in a positive manner also for the benefit, and knowledge can be used in negative manner also for some harm again. Nuclear technology, for example. Now, nuclear technology, knowledge of nuclear technology can be used by us to make atom bomb also and to destroy a city like Hiroshima and Nagasaki also. And the same nuclear technology can be used by us to make nuclear reactor also and to save the problem, to help us solve the problem of energy scarcity. Or it can be used in order to make nuclear medicine also. So there is nothing wrong, right or wrong, good or bad in nuclear technology. But how do we use that? Well, it is a question of right and wrong. It is the question of good and bad. So knowledge itself has no value. Because of that, the person who has a technical knowledge may use that technical knowledge in order to harm others. Well, a doctor, for example, he can use his knowledge of medical science in order to maximize his profit or even to kill his enemies and all, of course. He can do that. He can make a biological weapon, for example. He can, make cloning, for example. So he can harm other people also, because knowledge is, can be used in either manner, good also or bad also. So in order to ensure that this knowledge that the person has is used for a positive purpose, it is used for a betterment of the human being. So there must be some value system that could determine that how is that this knowledge is going to be used. How is it that this knowledge should never be used? Because remember, again, I repeat, knowledge can be used in a positive manner also for the benefit of mankind, and knowledge can be used in a destructive manner also to destroy the humanity. So how to use that knowledge? That is the question of value. This is the question of ethics. So every profession has a central value system, and that value system guides that the professional in that field, how is it that they are going to use that technical knowledge, for what purpose and in what manner. So for example, if you look at it, what is the most central value of the medical profession, for example? Most central value of the medical profession, I hope that you are aware of that, is the protection of human life. or sometimes we also call that as Hippocratic oath. You must be aware that every doctor has to take a Hippocratic oath. What does that oath mean again? That, well, first principle is that no harm. And the second principle is the do good. So these are two important principles that every doctor has to follow. So no harm. So doctors must always utilize their knowledge of medical science in such a manner that it does not harm anybody. First principle. And then after, they should ensure that it should do good to the others. So first principle is no harm to the others, and second principle is that to whatever extent possible, do good. That is the primary value system of the medical science, and every doctor, every practitioner of medical science must always profess that. That is the reason that, you know, that development of vaccine takes so much of time. Why is it that the COVID vaccine, for example, there people were skeptical that can we acquire this vaccine for such a small period of time? It takes years and years. Why so? Because before making a vaccine, doctors must ensure that it does not harm anybody. No possibility of harm should be there. And that requires lots and lots of experimentation, testing, different types of testing that, you know, that to ensure that harm should not be done. So that is the basic you can say value of medical profession. Every doctor has to ensure that their work should not harm others in any possible manner. Number one. Similarly, if you look at engineering, what is the most central value of engineering as a profession? Engineering, again, is a very important profession in the world. So important that we often say that today we are living in the world of engineers. Wherever you are, whatever you are doing today, you are always surrounded by the things that is made by an engineer. If you are in a building right now, that is made by an engineer. AC made by an engineer. And the board that is there behind me, made by an engineer. If you are on the road, made by an engineer. You are in a car or aeroplane, made by an engineer. So everything that you see, you are always, wherever you are, whatever you are doing today, you are always surrounded by the product, by the things made by an engineer. So engineers have a special responsibility that they should not use their knowledge in such a manner that people should be affected negatively. Because of that, we have a central value of the engineering profession also. And what is that? Those of you who are engineers may be aware of that. It is safety. So every engineer must always ensure that whenever they are making a product or any engineering, you can say endeavor and all, they must ensure that safety of the people is paramount. Safety should be taken care of. Nobody's safety should be compromised. That is the central value system of the engineering as a profession, or any other profession you can talk about. What is the legal system, for example? Legal profession. What is the central value system of legal profession? Is that it is justice. Justice must be done at all cost. What does that mean again? First principle again here is that you can say innocent should never be punished. Even if 10 guilty person may be let off, then also at least one innocent person should not get punishment. He must get justice. So the first principle of legal profession is that innocent should never get, you can say, punishment, or they should never be, we should never be unjust to an innocent person, unjust to that. That is legal profession. Or if you look at media as a profession, what is the most central value system of media as a profession? Well, today media and ethics appears to be oxymoron, but well, media also has an ethical system again. What is that again? This system is that truth must come out. Truth. That is the ultimate purpose of the media as a profession, that it must disseminate truth among the people, even if that truth is inconvenient, even if that truth is problematic sometimes, bothersome sometimes, even if that truth puts our, you can say, image of our nation may be at risk again. Then also, if the truth is there, that must come out, and people should know what that truth is. Dissemination of the truth. That is the central value system of media as a profession. Similarly, civil service. Civil service, as I told you, is also a profession. What is the central value system of civil service as a profession? Well, we know that it is public interest. Public interest. We will discuss that in a class later, that what is the meaning of that public interest. But most central value system of civil service is the public interest. So every action of civil service servants must be in such a manner that public interest is fulfilled. Public interest is not compromised. So this is the central value system of the civil service. Every profession you talk about, teaching as a profession. What is the important value system of teaching as a profession? Central value is that knowledge must be imparted from the teacher to the student, from the you can say teacher to the learner. So people must learn the right information. They must learn how to think again. That is the ultimate purpose of the teaching profession again. So idea is that whenever we talk about any profession, every profession has one central value system that guides the professional, that how is it that they are going to use that technical, that you can say knowledge, so that people should not be harmed, and well, it can be utilized for the good of the society, good of the majority of the people in the society. So that is the second important criteria of defining a profession. Every profession must have a central value system that should guide that how this specialized knowledge is going to be utilized by the practitioner of that profession. Second, and there is a third criteria also. Every profession has a professional organization. Professional organization which controls both of these factors. So this professional organization must ensure that every practitioner of that profession should have that specialized knowledge, and they use the value system. They use the value system in order to use the knowledge in an appropriate manner, in an ethical manner. So that should be guaranteed, that should be overlooked, that is overseen by some organization. So every profession has a professional guiding organization, controlling organization. So for example, in medical profession, we have the MCI earlier, Medical Council of India, now we have National Medical Commission. That ensures that every practitioner must have the requisite qualification, technical expertise, and they must always follow the ethical principle that makes profession so valuable in the society. In engineering, we have Engineers India Limited or whatever. In you can say legal profession, we have people, you can say that bar council, etc. That ensure that every lawyer, everybody who is practicing that profession follows the value system. In media, for example, we have PBI, Press Bureau of India, and in civil service we have the UPSC and CVC. So UPSC ensures that the people who become civil servant must have the technical knowledge. Then after, they train them for that value system, and then after, well, CVC and other organizations keeps an eye that every practitioner, every civil servant uses the value, you can say follows that value system. So these are the three important criteria that defines a profession. For any job, in order to become a profession, it must fulfill these three criteria. Then it becomes a profession. Otherwise, it will become a normal job or business or whatever else you can call it. So that is what is the meaning of the term profession here. Now, next important thing is that whenever we work in any of these professions, whether you are working in medical profession or engineering, or you can say media profession or the legal profession, or most importantly civil service, then we face certain dilemma in our life that puts us in a quandary, for example, that what to do in that case, what is right and what is wrong, should I do this or not. So when we face certain dilemma, then how can we solve these dilemmas? How can we look at how can we understand these dilemmas? Understanding these dilemma appropriately is very important. Why is it very important? Because it will help us to be a good civil servant, a successful civil servant, and to lead a happy life after that. Because if you do not resolve these dilemmas appropriately, then it will create lots and lots of professional and other moral problem in your life. So every civil servant, every professional should know what are these dilemmas that they may possibly face, and they should be mentally prepared for those dilemmas, and they should also know some broad guidelines that how can they solve these ethical dilemma. So in some detail we will talk about that now. Now, if you look at these professional dilemma, then there are two important dilemmas are there that are most pervasive, most common. Every professional, sometimes or the other, they face such dilemma. They must know how to solve them. We will discuss in some detail what are these professional dilemma. So this is exactly what we are going to talk about next. Remember that these dilemmas that I am going to talk about, these dilemmas are very, very important for civil service again, UPSC exam. Because in UPC exam, in fact, they had asked a direct question from these dilemmas. At least 3 questions I remember that from the last few years, 3 direct questions have been asked from these ethical dilemma. Not only that, every year in the case study section of your exam, well, these dilemmas can help you a lot to understand the case study and to find a more appropriate solution for that. So they are very, very important from examination point of view. What are those dilemmas? Now, first important dilemma that I'm going to talk about is what we call that as conflict of interest. Conflict of interest, the first important ethical dilemma. This is a very pervasive, very common ethical dilemma. Every professional, whether you are a doctor or an engineer or a civil servant or a media professional or is a legal professional, a judge, for example, a lawyer, for example. Now, in these cases, well, conflict of interest is very commonly faced by many of these professionals. We must know what is that conflict of interest, what are the different types of conflict of interest, and then finally we must also talk about how to resolve those conflict of interest. This is also very important because, as I told you, that for the last few years, 3 important questions have been asked from this topic, and all the 3 questions are from this conflict of interest. There was this direct question that what do you mean by write a short note on conflict of interest. In the answer to that question, you can write everything that we are going to talk about in this class. So, what is the conflict of interest and how does it influence our behavior? What are the different types of conflict of interest and how to solve them? Let us talk about a little of detail of that now. Now, if we look at definition of conflict of interest, then we can say that conflict of interest is that situation when the behavior of a civil servant, when the action of a civil servant or aims to serve an interest which is in conflict with his duty as a civil servant, then we say that this person is experiencing a conflict of interest. I repeat, when the behavior of a civil servant aims to serve an interest which is in conflict with his duty, his obligation as a civil servant, then we say that this person is experiencing a conflict of interest. That can be a very precise and simple definition of the term conflict of interest. Now, what does that mean? It means something like this. Suppose, for example, you take an action. As a civil servant, we take certain action. We take certain decision. Now, as we have seen just previously, again, previous discussion, that action of a civil servant or any professional for that matter must be guided by the central value system. So, whenever we as a professional take an action, then we must ensure that our action reflects those values, which is the bedrock of our profession. So, in the case of civil service, what is that value system? That is the public interest, as we have just now seen. Let us take civil service as an example, though this can be used for any other profession also. So, medical profession, that will be the Hippocratic oath. For engineering profession, that will be safety. For legal profession, that will be justice. And for media, that will be truth. For civil service, this is public interest. So, we say here that whenever we as a civil servant take certain action, certain decision, we can say exhibit certain behavior, then this behavior must always be guided by the public interest. Public interest must guide that what is it that we should do, what action we should take and what action we should not take, some action or some decision. That is the right thing to do. This is what is the ethical behavior of a civil servant or any other professional. This is what a professional is required to do. But sometimes what happens that we may have in a particular situation some private interest. I will give you some example of those private interests. Suppose we have some private interest. Now this private interest is also going to influence our action, is also trying to change our behavior, our action or our decision. Then we will say that this person whose action we are talking about is experiencing a conflict of interest, because now there is a conflict between his interest as a civil service and civil servant and his interest as a private person whose private interest, his personal interest may be at stake. So we will say that there is a conflict between the two, so that person is experiencing a conflict of interest. So that is the basic definition of the conflict of interest. Now, next important question is that why is that? What is the problem in that conflict of interest? What is it that conflict of interest does for us, which creates problem, which is difficult, which makes our life difficult as a civil servant or as a professional? Now, we often say that conflict of interest is problematic because it influences, it hampers the ability of the civil servant to make expert decision, trained decision, or you can say the right decision in general, professional decision in that case. Because civil servant, to understand the value system of public interest, civil servants are given lots of training. So once you clear the UPSC exam, then you will be given training during the training period again, that academy and all. Then after, your probation will be there, during which again you will be given certain training, and that training will guide you that how to take decisions. In fact, training is a part of life of civil servant or any professional. Throughout the life, they have to do the training. Doctors, for example, they never work, they always practice. What is the meaning of that? They are getting, every case for them is a training, is a practice. So till the end of their career, they do only practice. They do not do the job in general. So they are given lots and lots of training to ensure that their action must reflect the the central value system of that particular profession. But when there is a conflict of interest, then the decision making ability of the civil servant or of that professional will be compromised. He may do something that may be against the value system of civil service or that profession again, that will create a problem for him and the people who are going to use his services. That is the problem with the conflict of interest. Now, next important question is that what is the most common, most obvious type of conflict of interest that a civil servant faces in his career? Now we see here that the most obvious type of, most common, most pervasive type of conflict of interest that a civil servant faces is that when he is offered, when he or she is offered some money or gift or some other material benefits. When a civil servant is offered some money, some gift, some favor, or anything can be in the form of a bribe. So when he faces, you can say he is offered some money, some gift, some other material benefit or some favor or some bribe in order to influence his impartial judgment. His judgment must be impartial. We'll talk a lot about impartiality in civil service in our class later. So his judgment must be impartial, his judgment must be, well, objective. Now when a civil servant is offered some money, some favor, etc., in order to influence his decision, then we will say that this is creating a conflict of interest. Because the moment you take some money from someone or some favor, some gift, some bribe, etc., then it will create a private interest, that you are taking something privately for yourself that you should not take. So there will be conflict between your money that you take and the public interest that you are expected to uphold as a civil servant. So that is the most common type of conflict of interest. We often say that this type of conflict of interest always, you can say, hampers the integrity of their professional judgment. Conflict of interest, we'll talk a lot about that in some later class, is essentially a problem of integrity. Integrity is a very important aspect of civil services servants' life in general. As a civil servant, we must always maintain integrity of our personality. What is the meaning of the term integrity? Though we'll discuss that in much detail in our class later. But if you look at a very simple term, then integrity is that situation when our action is guided by our own value system. It means that our value system and our decisions, they are integrated together. So our value system tells us what is right, and, well, if we integrate it into that action, then that will become our right action. Doing the right thing always according to the value system that you are expected to uphold, well, this is what we call the integrity. Is not able to maintain that integrity, or when a civil servant enters into a conflict of interest situation, then that integrity is being violated. That integrity is broken. Because in this case, his action is not integrated with his value, his action is disintegrated, so as to be, you can say, connected with some other extraneous value. That is his personal interest, personal life problems and all. So this is the most obvious type of conflict of interest, when somebody offers us some money, some favor, some bribe, etc., etc. But some conflict of interest may not be that obvious. Some conflict of interest can be more subtle. more deeper, more can say micro rather than such obvious outsider that can be seen from outside. There can be more subtle, more deeper, more you can say substantial conflict of interest again. What can be that? For example, when a professional develops a personal relationship, when a professional develops a personal relationship with a client. Now, in this case, that personal relationship that he may develop with his client will create a conflict of interest. It's very commonly seen, for example, suppose you are a doctor. Let's talk about medical profession, particularly psychological doctor, counselor. Now, suppose you are a doctor, you are a counselor, and you are, can say, doing counseling to a client for a long period, maybe 6 months, 1 year, 5 years, because psychological counseling goes on for long, you know. Now, during this period, what happens that sometimes some counselors, some psychologists develop a personal, particularly when the person whom they are counseling, they belong to opposite sex. Then they develop some romantic relationship with their client and all. That will be a conflict of interest, or some other type of relationship also. So that is what we call the very subtle type of conflict of interest, very deep, very you can say micro type of conflict of interest that is internally, it's not obviously visible from outside, but it does hamper the behavior of the civil servant. So that is, I will give you some example of that shortly. Now before that, one more thing I would like to talk about, that when we talk about conflict of interest, we often talk about two types of conflict of interest. First we call potential conflict of interest. Potential conflict of interest. Now, as the name itself tells us that potential conflict of interest is not actually a conflict of interest, but in this we are putting ourselves in a situation that sometimes in future this situation may create a conflict of interest for us. It is a possible conflict of interest, a potential conflict of interest, a future conflict of interest that may arise because of our present action. Let's take an example. That will help you the potential conflict of interest also, and this subtle form of conflict of interest, personal relationship that I talked about. Let's take a small example. Suppose, for example, you are a civil servant. Suppose you are a tax officer. Now, on can say some holiday, for example, summer vacation or winter vacation, etc. Suppose you have gone out to on some holiday to some hotels, to some resort. Now there you meet a person, and after meeting that person, you establish a very good rapport, instant rapport with that person. You like that person a lot, you spend time together a lot, you enjoy together a lot, you go to shopping together, mountaineering together, trekking together, swimming together, or have your dinner together, go to club together. So for 15 days you enjoyed a lot. You know, sometimes we do develop a very instant rapport with even a stranger also. You develop that type of rapport with that person. After 15 days, suppose your holiday is over, you are coming back to your home again. Now this person tells you that, well, we enjoyed ourselves, our time together so much. So let us make this friendship, this relationship that we have right now here as a permanent friendship. Let's become permanent friends. So that person can say, extends a hands of friendship to you, that let's be a friend. Now you come to know that this person, who is otherwise such a good person that you enjoy so much together, but this person is a big businessman. Now he has, or he may have a business interest in a city where you may be posted as a tax officer. Now, if you accept his friendship, then it will create a type of potential conflict of interest. Why so? Because tomorrow his tax file may be at your office, on your table. And then in this case, your behavior, your action of scrutinizing his tax file may be hampered because by your relationship with him. So in this case, you see here that your public interest is that you must be impartial in judging everybody's tax file. But in this case, your personal friendship may influence your behavior, that I should be a bit lenient towards my friend because we are such a good friends in general. It may possibly create a conflict of interest. So that can be a situation. This is what we mean by this thing again, that a personal relationship. So if you accept this friendship from that person, then this may possibly create a potential, not an actual conflict. There is no actual conflict now, but it may create a conflict of interest in the future. That is the example of that. How can we help solve this problem? We'll talk about that shortly. that sometimes conflict of interest may not only be potential, it can be actual also. It can be the actual conflict of interest as well. In this case, there is no possibility in the future, but conflict of interest is right now and here on our door. It is there present with us again. So that can be actual conflict of interest. So normally when we talk about conflict of interest, then we often talk about two types of conflicts: a potential conflict of interest and the actual real conflict of interest. Let's take an example of this second one also. This example that I am going to talk about, it was a real case study asked in the UPSC exam a few years ago. As I told you that these conflict of interest, every year you can find a few case study where conflict of interest can be one way to look at the problem and to get a solution to that problem as well. Let's take that example. Now here the question is that, the case study here is that suppose you are a PIO, Public Information Officer, in the RTI department of a particular of your office. PIO you are. Now one day somebody from public, he seeks and files an RTI application to you, and under that application he wants to get some information about a particular case in which you yourself or along with some of your colleague had done something wrong in the past. Now this will create a conflict of interest. Now if you reveal the information, so just think of it. As a PIO, your job is the public interest again. What is that public interest? That you must reveal the information. So your job tells you that you must reveal the information. But if you reveal the information, then you are in trouble along with some of your colleague. So that will create a private interest. It will be a question of actual conflict of interests. You have a dilemma that should I reveal that information or not? Should I give that information to the person or not? If I give that information to the person, I am putting myself and many of my colleagues at risk. There may be inquiry, there may be some problem. And if I don't do that, then I am violating my duty as a civil servant. That is something unethical. What to do in that case? So that is a real conflict of interest, an actual conflict of interest. It's not something that is potential. You have to handle that conflict of interest right now, here. So normally there are two types of conflict of interest. Both of these examples we had seen here. Now, next question is that if there is a conflict of interest, how can we solve that conflict of interest? How can we resolve that conflict of interest? We often say that the best way to resolve a conflict of interest, particularly potential conflict of interest, is to simply avoid them. The best way to resolve a conflict of interest is to simply avoid them. Act in such a manner that you should not find yourself in a potential situation of conflict of interest. So in the case of that friendship, that this businessman wants to make friendship with you, then what should be the right thing for you to do? In this case, you can say you must be very clear in your mind that no, this relationship is going to create a potential conflict of interest in my future career. So if you are a good civil servant, an ethical civil servant, a good professional, then what you should do in that case? Well, you should politely refuse that person, telling him that yes, I am very happy that we enjoyed so much of our time together, but well, I am extremely sorry that my job as a civil servant, as a tax officer, does not allow me to mix with the big businessman. Saying that, you must politely refuse that relationship, keep away from that person. Even if that person is not that, he may be a bad person. Even if he is a good person, then perhaps as a civil servant, you should try to avoid that relationship. Do not enter into that relationship. Avoid it as much as possible. That's why we often say that civil servant must lead their personal life also in such a manner that they should not enter into a potential conflict of interest situation. Even their personal decisions, for example, whom to make friendship with, there's a personal decision. Everybody has a private life. So even in your private life, well, what are the important decisions you are taking? You must always keep in mind that you are a civil servant. And as a civil servant, there are certain ethical values that you have to uphold under any circumstances. So lead your life in such a manner that you should not create conflict of interest. Lead life in a simple manner. Even in such personal questions like whom to marry, which area to stay in, whom to make friendship with, which club to join, who are the people with whom I should socialize. So these are the personal decision also, personal life decision also, but they must also be taken by keeping in mind the ethical system of your profession in general. That is a very, very important thing that a civil servant should always keep in mind. That's why we often say that a civil servant should not mix very closely with the big businessman, corporate leaders, or you can say the politicians. So, because they are the people, politicians or the businessmen, etc., they are the people who are often likely to create a conflict of interest in the life of a civil servant. They must try to keep a respectable distance from them. So their personal life also should be so clean, so clear that they should avoid every possible conflict of interest. This is how our life should be as a civil servant. So, best way to resolve a conflict of interest is to simply avoid it. Do not enter into any conflict of interest situation. Number one. So, that is how we can avoid this resolution. If there is a potential conflict of interest, avoid it. But what if avoiding is not possible? What if there is actual conflict of interest? Then we cannot avoid that. So if you are a PIO, in that case, the wrong has already been done and the RTI application is already there with you. And you have to take decision. You have to take action right now. You cannot avoid it. You cannot stop it in that case. Now, how can we solve that? In actual conflict of interest situation, we say that whenever we enter into actual conflict of interest, we must resolve that conflict of interest as soon as possible in such a manner that public interest is upheld. You must keep in mind that public interest is primary, is supreme, cannot be compromised. So resolve that conflict of interest in such a manner that, well, public interest is upheld. Public interest must have supremacy over the private interest. Public interest must have supersede any private interest that we can have. How can we resolve that? The easiest way to resolve the conflict of interest is to simply recuse oneself. From that case by passing the case over to some other professional like a senior or a colleague. So recusal is a very important part of the resolution of the conflict of interest. That in this case you can say here that in this situation I have a conflict of interest, so pass this case over to your senior, telling him that in this case I have a conflict of interest, so I recuse myself, I dissociate myself from that particular case. You know, you must have seen that very often this happens in a legal profession particularly. Suppose you are a judge and in your court there is a lawyer who is pleading for an accused, and that lawyer is your distant relative. Now in this case, remember that it will create a conflict of interest because your personal relation with the lawyer may hamper your judgment as an impartial judge. It will create a conflict of interest. In such case, you must have seen that many judges recuse themselves, pass this case to some other bench, saying that in this case you cannot ask that lawyer not to fight a case. It is his profession, his job. But as a judge, we can ensure that I can dissociate myself from that case. Why to put doubt in the mind of the people? That people may start thinking that okay, you are trying. If you give judgment in favor of that lawyer, then people may have this doubt in the mind that you are actually doing favor to your relative. So that will create a doubt, that will create a confusion in the mind of the people, that will hamper your image as a civil servant, as a judge, or it will ultimately be wrong for have a negative impact on the whole justice system. So this is the second important thing that can be done by a civil servant: recuse yourself from that case. And this is a solution that I will suggest for that case, PIO wala case. In that case, what you can do here is that you can pass this case over to some other professional, your senior for example, citing that in this case I have a conflict of interest. Use these words in your answer, that in this case I have a conflict of interest and because of that I recuse myself from that case. Pass this case over to your senior, tell him that okay, you can handle the case that you want, the way you want. Again, I am not going to be in this case. And then after, tell your colleagues that yes, this case in which some wrong has happened in the past is going to be public now. So be ready with your defense. Well, of course, if you have done something wrong, then be ready with your defense for that wrong, or be ready to suffer for that, get the punishment. But in this case, the right thing from our point of view will be that recuse yourself from that case, dissociate yourself from that case, refuse to consider that case yourself. That is the next important thing. But in either case, whether you can say recuse yourself or not, in either case, one of the very important thing that we should keep in mind is that a civil servant must always disclose his conflict of interest. he must always disclose his conflict of interest. We should never hide it. It's a very, very important thing that we need to keep in mind. What is the meaning of the term disclosure? Why is that disclosure is so important? We often say that the mere existence of a conflict of interest may not necessarily result into a compromised professional judgment. It is possible that I may have a conflict of interest, and even then, well, I can be ethical. I can take the right. I have confidence over myself that okay, I can do everything. I can you can say maintain my integrity. I can maintain my honesty. I can maintain my ethical system, ethical value. So it is possible. There are some people, they say, okay, I have a conflict of interest, but even then I'm going to handle that case. It's my job. I will do that, and I will do that honestly with integrity. So we see here that the mere existence of conflict of interest is not necessarily a sign of unethical intent, but any attempt to hide a conflict of interest is necessarily a sign of unethical intent. So if you try to hide your conflict of interest, then be sure there is something unethical in your mind. That should never be done. So the idea is that a civil servant must always disclose their conflict. They never hide it. Hiding is a sign of unethical intent. Why hiding is a sign of unethical intent? We'll discuss that in a later class. What is the problem with the hiding things? Again, never hide your conflict of interest. Now, what is the importance of disclosure of a conflict of interest? Disclosure of a conflict of interest will have two advantages. First, the advantage will be that it will increase our self of consciousness. We will make ourselves more self-conscious. It will increase our it will make ourselves more self-conscious, that we should know, we should be clear that people know that there is a conflict of interest, so I should be careful that I do not do anything wrong. So it will create a moral burden on our mind. We'll talk about self-consciousness a lot in our later class, that people who are more self-conscious, they are less likely to do the wrong thing. So it will make you more conscious, more, you can say, objective in your judgment, and more afraid that people know that you have a conflict of interest. So you should be extra careful in that case, that you should not do the wrong. That is one advantage. But there is a second advantage also, that if you disclose your conflict of interest, then we can say that in this situation, others can also monitor us. So if you disclose your conflict of interest to your senior, for example, then your senior will also keep an eye on you that you are not doing anything wrong. And idea here is that suppose, for example, after this something wrong happens to you in that decision. Well, we are human, we can do the wrong anytime. So if something wrong happens, then at least you can claim that, okay, my conscience is clear. I did not do it wrong because of my intention. Intention is a very important part of ethics that we will discuss in our class. What is the importance of having right intention? So in this case, you can claim to the people that my intentions were not right. It happened because of some other factor. And your senior will also have to share that blame. He will also have to be careful that no, you do not do anything wrong. So in this case, at least your conscience will be clear. You will not be personally, blamed for the wrong that may possibly happen in that case. So if you disclose your conflict of interest, then these are the two important advantages that you will have again. So we say here that conflict of interest may not always result in an unethical judgment, but it should never be hidden under any circumstances. You must always disclose our conflict of interest to the competent authority, that in this case I have a conflict of interest and I am going to handle this in this manner. So that is the meaning of the term conflict of interest, and this is how it can be handled appropriately. We have to understand, as I told you, that every year a few questions will be there, directly or indirectly, case study, or the direct question is section A, where conflict of interest can be used in order to frame your answer, in order to arrive at your solution to the problem.